Just quickly on logistics, this meeting will be recorded. It will post it online for reference. We can use chats to keep conversation going while presentations are happening to get ideas out there. While you are thinking about things, you can ask questions there, and then I'll interrupt at the right time to ask those questions, or you can always raise your hand if you're on the advisory committee, and you can unmute yourself and we can just have a conversation that way. So either one is a great option. And then we also have time for public comment towards the end of the meeting. And just to get started, I know a lot of you have been through several WebEx meetings with us now, but if you want to raise your hand or put in the chat if you have any questions on WebEx, and we can answer those. Great. So seeing no hands and no chats. Just a note on how this meeting will be facilitated. I'll be moderating. We'll have a couple of different staff members presenting, and then we also have some community agreements that you've seen before, but just a reminder of what those are. Essentially, we want this to be an inclusive and respectful meeting, as it always has been. So be present, be ready to learn. We're asking for a lot of feedback today, so even though it doesn't say it here, I hope that people will be forthcoming, raise their hands, share their thoughts on things, be respectful to others. Remember that learning can happen in uncomfortable places sometimes. Listen to learn and not necessarily to respond, although today we're hoping you'll listen to learn and respond to some of the plans that we have that we're getting ready to roll out. And then thanks for being flexible and patient around technology needs or changes. Many of you were on when I just got kicked off, so these things happen. And then also, I have my own COVID need today. I have a 4-year-old home with me. My mom just randomly showed up, like as though she knew magically that I was home alone with a 4-year-old and running a meeting. So it should be pretty chill, but just in case she needs anything. And then if you need something, I'll be providing, snacks and tablet time for my daughter if she needs it. But if you need anything, you can contact me or Patricia in the chat and we'll help you out. And then this is our agenda today. We're already through objectives, logistics, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the charter that we chatted about extensively at our January meeting. We'll get a program update from James Kogel, who's one of our primary program staffers. And then we'll also hear from Michael Williams, who is our new assistant director of central services for the agency, about the competitive review process. Public comment, next steps. Your time is valuable. We want to make this a quick meeting, but just want to make sure that we're engaging you and getting your thoughts and opinions as we go. So I sent along a copy of the advisory committee charter. It's also posted online under meeting materials for those who are joining us as members of the public. And essentially, it's just meant to be an agreement between the agency and the advisory committee about the course of work going forward for the group. As many folks know, that the role of the advisory committee is largely in the statutes. And then we also asked for and got feedback from you all earlier in January, like I said, and incorporated that into the draft that I sent around, just to make sure that I say out loud what we envision the role being, what we think you envision the role being, is that this group serves as a rulemaking advisory committee. That mostly happened in the fall and into the early winter. But if we need to do more rule advisory, or you all think we need to do more rulemaking, then this group would serve that function again. To provide feedback and advice on program implementation, that's what today is about. And then assist with outreach efforts, and finally expect 4 meetings per year. This group had a really busy, fall to winter with this advisory group. And so I think we could get to 4 meetings this calendar year, but it wouldn't shock me if we ended up with 3 and did one early in the following year, just given how many meetings you all have already had to have for this group, just to kind of get it back out to the 4 per year. What's the word I'm looking for? Like tempo. So the other thing I wanted to say about what is not part of the advisory committee charter is being part of the competitive review committee. We talked about this in the fall, that it'll be a separate committee, although anyone on the advisory committee is welcome to put their hat in the ring and be part of that process. So with that, if anyone has any questions or comments, I would love to hear them now. Or we could just kind of do like thumbs up to show general assent to the charter that was sent around. Okay. Oh, Audrey, you're reminding me I wanted to welcome you at the beginning. And then I forgot when my computer crashed. Hi, Audrey. Audrey, you're Franklin's mom. What's happening? I'm Delaney's mom. You're on mute, but Audrey and I just met in real life.
Hi, what a small world.
Oh my gosh, that is so crazy. Okay.
Yes, Audrey, aka Franklin's mom from Portland General, and glad to be here.
Audrey and I met like 2 weeks ago at our school. So anyway, her son says please and thank you, and that is more novel than you would think. All right, well, welcome. Anybody else? Audrey's brand new. She says yes. Can I get any other like thumbs up or any other? Turn your camera on. Say something nice. All right, it's gonna be a start. Oh, I got a couple more. Yay! Okay, cool. Thank you. Ollie.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I was wondering if this is, I guess, the time to give some feedback about the charter, specifically around the membership for the advisory committee. And I was looking specifically at number 6, where it's a representative from a federally recognized Oregon Indian tribe. And I was feeling like possibly doing at least 2 representatives from Oregon tribes. I know some of the other memberships call for more than one, such as 3 representatives from local government or representatives from kind of like community-based organizations. So I would like to see more representation from federally recognized tribes or tribal communities, just to have the opportunity to have more than one seat.
Great. We pulled that directly from the statute. That said, I can just confirm that we can add at least in front of there. If there, and then we can circle that back around with folks. I would not be surprised. I would be surprised if there are objections. I will say, Ollie, I think you've heard me talk about this in other venues potentially. We're really grateful to have Danny Martinez, who's an emergency manager for the Warm Springs on this group. We have found that when we're asking for service on committees like this of tribes right now, we're getting a lot of like we're at capacity and feeling pretty overwhelmed. And so I would love to do that, but I would really love help in identifying who might be interested since we're talking to staff at the tribes and finding that they're feeling at capacity.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely sitting on other committees, it's the same thing. There's a lot of asks for sure coming out.
Right.
So also just wondering what other ways there could be some involvement, just like opportunities to engage that we could really be able to get some of their feedback and input as well. But
Yeah.
other than that, I think it looks great. And I think the other note for the meetings and procedures, so at the very bottom on 5C, the department will provide materials to advisory committee members prior to the meetings to allow time for review. If that could be either like in a timely manner or putting maybe like a week before or something like that, just to keep some accountability to make sure things are in a timely manner and that we have time to review things. Since I know a lot of us, this is just a little sliver of what we do for our work.
Right, totally fair. Yeah, we'd be glad to add a week there, and I'm sure no one would object to that. And we promise to get better about getting things out earlier. I think the person who was leading on the charter left our staff, and it took us a minute to figure out where it was at. So sorry about the delay on that. That's on us. But that's also why we didn't send anything else out because we were like, it's too late. But we're just gonna kind of go through our plans for the review process, and then we can talk about if we need to do sending something out and giving people more time outside of the meeting to respond. So that was kind of our plan B. But thanks, Sally. I appreciate the feedback. I'm happy to make both of those edits, and then I'll just circulate it out and with the changes and do sort of a silence is consent sort of thing. Like if there's any concerns to let us know. Otherwise, we'll give it some time and then assume people are good with it and move forward with posting that online and having it be the scope of work for this group. Anybody else have any feedback? Thanks, Ale.
Yeah, I actually had one more
Oh,
comment.
great.
Sorry for
Perfect.
taking this on. But just around also with the meetings and procedures, I'm just curious about how to know when Odo is considering or not considering feedback, right? So when we send in comments, if there could be a process of getting some updates back of either having the finalized rules or whatever it is that we're giving comments on and being able to show like this is where we took in some comments and or this is why we didn't consider these comments, but just having a process to kind of validate the feedback or what was considered and what was not, I think would be really helpful for me specifically of like turning in some comments and then not knowing if it was applied or not.
Right. Yeah, we do a process with comments on rules where we do a rulemaking report that then shares how we took those comments and when we didn't, for what reason we didn't choose to incorporate that comment. So we have a process for doing that technically within the rulemaking process. So I can just make sure that that gets out in the future for rulemaking, and then we can talk about how to do it for more informal discussions like the one we're having today.
Great, thank you so
And I'll
much.
see about incorporating some language into there too. Great. All right. Anything else from anyone else? Great. Okay, I'll move us on, and I got those edits and notes, and stay tuned on the charter. And with that, I will turn things over to James Kogel.
Thanks, Christy. So I'm just going to put a link in the chat actually to just a summary of the comments received during the public comment for the draft rules, which also kind of has a little summary of the other response to each rule, each comment as well, just fit in terms of the comments received during the draft rule making process, in case that's of interest. But in terms of the program update, we have a program mailbox now, which is active, and the point of contact for the program to ensure we address all the communications. And we've been having lots of questions coming into the mailbox from interested parties, and we're answering them and posting both the questions and answers online to assist applicants, and that Q&A is up on the website. Since our last meeting, all 4 opportunity announcements were launched on March 7th. And since then, Odo has hosted webinars with a number of different groups to raise awareness of the program and answer questions interested parties had. We have another webinar open to all at 9 a.m. Wednesday, May 25th. So next week on Wednesday. The digital application is still under development, but we are in the very final testing and bug fixing stage, and the aim is to launch on May 23rd on Monday. This will be accessible from the program homepage or Odo's customer service portal. Due to the delay in launching the application portal, we have sent a survey out to interested parties who participated in the informational webinars, requesting feedback regarding the current timeline for the first round of opportunity announcements and whether organizations will still have time to submit an application. And we'll be discussing timeline later in the presentation. We have a couple of resources published on the program website. First is a checklist of information that applicants need for each of the opportunity announcements. This will help them pull together the information that we need. We also got applicant resources that are designed to aid applicants demonstrate their communities kind of fits into the qualifying community or system in describing resiliency benefits for the program. And we've also had some changes to the team. So Rob Delmar, who a huge amount of help setting up the program, is transitioning back to his usual duties in the agency. We've got Pandian Krishnaswamy, who is the program manager of the Energy Development Services team, which oversees this and several of the other incentive programs Odo offers. He's currently out of the office. We have a couple of new members of the team. We've got Clay Decker and Patricia Phillips. Clay, if you want to pop on and say hi, and Patricia.
Sure. Hello. My name is Clay Deckert. Can you hear me all right, James?
Yeah.
Great. So Clay Deckert, I started on April 25th, and I've just been diving in and look forward to getting to know the community members and your organizations, and work really hard to maximize impact of this program. So I work for Pondian, and I am dedicated to the CREP program. So look forward to getting fully plugged in. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Clay. Patricia, you able to kind of pop in?
Of course. I'm Patricia Phillips. I'm the one who answers emails and responds to phone calls. And so you may be seeing my name somewhere about, and I look forward to working with you as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. And we're also hiring a senior incentives analyst for the program, and that job announcement is currently active. So we'll be hiring that position as well. Kathy Conley, the previous assistant director of the Central Services Division, has also left Odo, and we have Michael Williams, who is the new assistant director of the Central Services Division. And I'll be handing over to him in just a moment to go run through the competitive review process. But I wanted to see if there's any questions first on kind of the program updates I just kind of ran through. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions. In which case, I will hand over to Michael to run through the competitive review. I'm happy to answer other questions if they arise during the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. As was mentioned before, I'm stepping into the role of Assistant Director for Central Services, which will include working with the incentive team that we have here in the CREP program. So today I'd like to just talk to you about the competitive review process and get some, throw out some ideas of what we're thinking that might look like, and get some feedback from you to see what you think about those ideas and what other ideas you might have on how we can get this accomplished. So first I'd like to go over the review process, which has 3 phases: the completion and eligibility review, the competitive review, and the director's award. In the completeness review, we're just looking at the information that was presented to make sure that it has everything that's needed for the application to pass into competitive review. And in the competitive review, we're going to look at the scoring each of the applicants across the criteria that were in the opportunity announcement. We will be providing a guide to the review committee to help them assist in their reviews and ensure consistency on how the applications are being scored. And then in the technical review part, which will happen there, the technical feasibility, that's just staff looking at industry standard, the application and what's being proposed, and comparing them to industry standards, just to make sure that the system, the energy system being proposed for planning or construction is technically feasible, meets minimum requirements of the systems, and should operate in accordance with the representations made in the application. And then in the director's award process, we'd be kind of pulling in all of that feedback from the competitive review, from the scores, and then looking at that across all of the opportunity announcements. As James mentioned, the 4 opportunity announcements, making a final assessment on budget and awards. So one question that I might have for the team here is, when we're getting that feedback from the competitive scoring, which would, potentially be a mix of internal and external folks, what that should feedback should look like. Should that be scoring where everyone just gives a means their own scoring and we just take an average of that, or should there be a review meeting where we all talk through what the scoring is before making recommendations to the director, or are there other methods for kind of gathering and combining that feedback? So I'll open up the floor for any comments or suggestions on that.
Hi, this is Brandy Martin with DOE. I can just offer my experience with a few different review processes. The ones I've participated in have all been individual reviews, but then there's an opportunity to discuss afterwards. So each reviewer has the opportunity to score and take notes, and then the group can discuss. I've also been on some where there's a mandatory group discussion if the review scores differ by a large amount. So when everybody's on the same page, it's not maybe as urgent to have the group discussion, but when there are large discrepancies, kind of figuring out if it was a question of different interpretations or did someone maybe miss the criteria that was on a certain page. But I've had some good success with that method.
All right. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. Anyone else have other comments or maybe experiences they've had in other review committees that could help inform what we're doing?
Hi, this is Phil Chang speaking, and I would like to express support for a process like Randy just described. With a new program, it seems like there would be real value in having, letting people do their individual scoring, but then still have kind of a group discussion before announcements of awards, because it's quite possible, with a new program that we don't all understand exactly what the program criteria are and, what the program is looking for, what the goals are. And, through discussion after reading proposals, those things might become more clear and people might have different opinions about certain proposals based on that.
Okay, thank you. All right, if there's more questions or comments about that, I can talk about some of the other things we've been considering as we're trying to get a competitive review committee together, but definitely if there's any other comments, feel free to hop in. All right. I think we can move to the next slide. So with the competitive process, again, we'll be scoring all these projects against the criteria outlined in the opportunity announcement. And so some of the things we're trying to consider is what the size of the committee should be and the time commitment, and kind of what resources and things we can provide. So right now our thinking is having a committee of 5 to 8 people per grouping, and what I mean by per grouping will make sense as we get into the next slide. But just saying is 5 to 8 people looking at the same group of projects is that about the right size for looking at the time commitment? Here we're gonna have projects and people are gonna be looking at, we don't know how many projects we'll have in, so that's gonna be one of kind of the big X factors there, but how much is a reasonable amount of time to ask people who want to be on the competitive committee to be available? And we're going with 20 hours a week as kind of a base assumption of how many hours it might take to be able to get the applications done within the review period. That's kind of an estimate, but again, we're not this being a new program and us launching off the ground, not 100% sure what that commitment looks like. So definitely any feedback on what that looks like. We know that your participation in here with the committee, is does need is a time commitment from you and maybe requiring other resources, and that one of the things that people have asked about is our ability to provide some kind of assistance or compensation for participating in the committee for those that need it. And we are actively working on trying to see if we could get this figured out, modeling it on some things that have been tried out in other state agencies and other natural resource agencies to kind of maybe help with the process. So we don't have that quite figured out yet, but we are actively working to try to see if compensation is or if financial assistance is something that we'd be able to provide. Hoping to have it ready in time for this competitive process, but we're actively working on it, so I can't say that that would definitely happen on at least this round. The other thing is that we've talked about the conflict of interest within this group of people on the committee and what their association is with any of the projects that are there, and kind of making sure that there's a clear line between being part of a project that's in the competitive process and then being one of the people that evaluate the process. So that's something that we're actively kind of working to develop. And then we also want to make sure that we have a diverse and range of views of people on that competitive committee. So we have an interest form that we're also working on to solicit interest that would be on our website that would let people, anybody notify us that they're interested in being on the competitive review committee, telling us about their experiences and qualifications for reviewing the applications and letting us get that out there. So, so I guess that I would open it up now to see if any of that sounds, how that sounds to everybody, if that committee size is reasonable, if that time commitment is reasonable, and what other criteria or things we should look at in the competitive, when putting together the competitive committee.
While people are organizing their thoughts, my chat is kind of formatted funny, and I didn't realize we have
Mine too. Yeah.
a bunch of chats. I guess it's just today. It's interesting. So I just wanted to cover that we had some feedback kind of on the past slide and this one. Brandy suggests training for reviewers is key. That's really good, as well as brief feedback to recipients on strengths and weaknesses. Since we've suggested that if folks don't get the grant at first, that they try again. So that's good advice. And then consider having the review committee sign an NDNA from Mike Harriman. Thanks, Mike. And then Brandy suggests 3 people per application, although the review group is longer. And Mark says, I agree with Brandy. Maybe you'll have more willing volunteers than he's had in the past, but up to 8 per application is more than he's ever been able to get onto a committee. Not sure we were thinking 5 to 8 people per application necessarily, but I'm not sure. And then 3 to 4 has been the minimum per application in his experience. And then, yes, we are planning on compensating reviewers. So he says that might help with your numbers. So anybody else have any thoughts outside the chat they'd like to share on this general plan? I think we're really curious about the hours per week. We're like self-selecting, but giving people the ability to self-select, and kind of our application form has them kind of telling us their availability. So that's one way we'll kind of figure out what's doable, but we also want to get the grants moving along. And so want to have the process be, as fast as it can be. So kind of trying to find that balance. So any feedback on that, especially, I think is something we've really been thinking and talking about a lot internally.
Hey, this is Mark. Thank you for conveying my chat comments there, Christy. Appreciate that. Was the 20 hours a week based on a number of hours per application? Because I mean, it's hard for me to think about, is 20 hours enough if I have no idea how many applications we're talking about somebody would be reviewing?
Yeah, we don't know that either.
Yeah. Well, and I know it's new, so you don't know how many you're going to get. I'm just wondering, did you pull that number? Did you just guess 20 hours overall, or were you thinking, well, somebody's maybe going to get 20 applications in an hour per application kind of math that you did there?
We were, I think that was to some extent a guess and thinking that if we had an application and took a few hours, for an application took an hour to review or something, and we got it in, that it could be up to 20 hours. But I would say that that's going to be highly dependent on the number of applications we get in and to some extent how much material is provided. So I think we were
That's
thinking,
good. Yeah,
yeah.
that's the way I would think about it, and the way I would, when you're talking to potential reviewers, convey it that way, like per application, so that they understand it's not, because 20 hours might freak some people out if, they're busy at the time you happen to call them to ask to participate. So more of the how much time per application, and then, you obviously don't know how many you're going to get. So
Right. And I think that especially after the first round, that'll be some of the feedback we would solicit from the competitive review committee to just verify how much time it took them per application and be able to provide better estimates in the future. And then, Mark, I think on as Chris was saying, the per application, we were thinking more about there'd be groupings, but that everyone would be looking at multiple applications across so that they can pair them. Is that what you were talking about? Just to make sure I'm tracking when you're saying 3 people per application.
were you asking me or Brandy or Christy? Sorry, I missed.
Sorry, I think I was. I'm sorry. My chat's showing up funky. Sorry, I apologize if I'm getting wrong.
You're talking to Mark, and that was Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, well, 3 to 4 has just kind of been how the number of people I've been able to get to participate in the overall committee, just the way I've been able to break it down. 3 to 4 has been the minimum that works for me. It's great to have more if I can, but just saying from my experience, that's been the minimum that I think
it's been harder to get
more process. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And then we had another question, and this is from Jennifer Jolly. Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for being here. She just wants to know if we don't get the committee as hoped, would the agency move forward to get the grants going? And I think that what we heard from the advisory committee was that they felt strongly we needed to have there be external involvement in the process to ensure we're hearing from communities and just different types of people than just a state agency. And our thoughts. So I think we would be really, what's the word, shaking the trees to get committee members before we would make the decision to get that going. And we'd probably circle back with the advisory committee to get their advice on how we should proceed if we find that we have an issue getting enough people. And then Jenny shared technical feasibility screening that precedes the committee review, or would committee be responsible for determining technical feasibility? Michael?
So the technical feasibility screening would happen. It wouldn't precede the committee review. There are some technical requirements within the committee review that the competitive committee members would be looking at. And Odo would do, and I'm open. We're actually soliciting feedback on this too. This would be something if you had ideas, but Odo's internal team would also kind of do a ranking of making sure that things are to industry standards and can kind of would be in like the things that are represented in the application are feasible and would work out. So I think that would happen either concurrently with the committee, and that feedback would be brought back to the director. But it wouldn't happen beforehand because by the rules, any applications that are complete do have to move forward to competitive review. Not sure if that.
Yeah, I think that answers the question. I think we have some technical aspects on the scoring guide, the rubric that you all looked at last year or maybe in January. So it would still be there, but there would be a separate technical review. All right, I don't see anything else in the chat. I don't see any hands up or anybody off mute jumping up in their chairs to talk. So we can move on to the next slide.
So one of the other things, which gets into, we're not sure how many hours per week, how how many applications we're going to get in or what that review process is, as we're new processes, kind of figuring out how to manage that workload for people who are on the committee. So one of the things we wanted to propose for feedback and see if anyone had other ideas how we could do this would be breaking down to a number of groupings of the competitive, to having multiple competitive review committees if necessary. So the first scenario, and these are the different scenarios based on the number of applications we received. So if the number of applications is undersubscribed and we don't, there's more funding available than requested, we wouldn't convene an external review committee. We would do our completeness check internally and our feasibility training, and then any applications that are complete and feasible would receive funding. The second scenario, which we hope we get at least two, where we're slightly oversubscribed, would allow us to have one competitive review committee, and they would look at all of the applications that we received. And so the process for that would be Odo would do our completeness review. We'd do the single evaluation committee would review all the projects, and then, as we talked about earlier, deciding on maybe everyone ranks scores individually and we have a consensus meeting or something like that. And those reviews would go to the director. And then in the end, we'd have kind of a wrap up meeting with everyone to discuss the results in the awards. That would work essentially the same process of review, completeness review committee, evaluation director, recommendations, and an award for all these other ones. But for if it's moderately oversubscribed, to keep the workload again for the committee, we would break up into multiple competitive review committees, and that would be by the opportunity announcements. So currently, we could either do that by planning and construction opportunity announcements, or we could do it by all four of the competitive, the construction and planning for energy resilience and renewable energy systems. And if we're largely oversubscribed, we would break out the competitive review committees by that opportunity announcement, like I just said, extend that by 1 to 2 weeks, and then potentially have other ways of breaking down the application. So maybe use breakdown committees to review certain portions of the criteria in the evaluation committee, again, with the idea being how do we best manage the workload to be able to stick to our timelines and get going. So are there other ways that we could divide up, or have competitive committees if we wanted to, if we ended up hopefully with an oversubscription, that would allow us to kind of moderate the workload?
One thing I'll just point out in the chat, I got a thumbs up from another member, and hopefully Brandy, who put this into the chat, you heard some seeds of this as Michael was talking on this slide, because you typed this up before. But she just mentioned considering like breaking down the time commitment maybe in the interest form by having like a training and then individual review, and then like setting the expectation that we'd have that discussion. And I think part of it is that we don't know how many applications we're going to get. And I meant to kind of sprinkle this in when James was giving the program update. We have some hints. So I'll just kind of let you know the hints we're getting about how many applications we might have. So far, we've done, we have a public webinar next week, which is our first public webinar that we've publicized ourselves, with 70 folks RSVP'd to attend. That's next Wednesday. It includes a lot of sort of eligible entities, but it also includes contractors, like Amoresco has been coming to these and is coming to that one, for example, just to give one example, not to like give them an advertisement, but I know that they're contractors. So when I see their email address, I know where they are. But then the other hint is we've done, I think, 7 webinars so far where we've gone to associations like the League of Oregon Cities and had them invite folks and done a webinar for them. And we've had a lot of people turn up at those. We've had well over 100 people turn up to those and ask questions about if their project ideas would qualify. And sometimes we've said no, but a lot of times it's been things that could work. So that shows us that there's definitely interest out there. The other hint we have is we're going to talk about timeline in a second. James mentioned we sent out a survey about should we extend our application deadline for first review, and we had 44 folks take that survey. So these are hints that we have just to kind of help give some context to this. But I think yeah, kind of figuring out the contingencies, right? Depending on what happens. So any thoughts on these contingencies? Brandy's idea sounds great. It's like, I think what we're thinking and adds a little detail to it, and making it public is great. Yeah, I think it does sound like we have a lot of interest. We're trying to be, it's like exciting, but also kind of nerve-wracking, but yeah. Right, I don't see any other hands up or any other chats. So other than Randy saying it looks like we have a lot of interest. Thanks, Randy. All right, I'll go to the next slide.
All right, thanks. So as Christy was mentioning, we did send out a survey. We're launching the online application portal on Monday. So on our original timeline, that would give applicants slightly less than 3 weeks to submit an application. So we asked a survey of stakeholders, which hopefully some of you saw, if they would suggest that we extend the timelines for submitting applications, which would of course then have a trickle down effect to the review and award process. So the vast majority of respondents said we should extend the timeline, and more than 2/3 said we should extend it by a month. So here's what that timeline would look like if we extended it for a month, bringing award extension, the director's award process essentially into September, mid to late September, and so we just want to get some feedback on that timeline, and knowing that that would also kind of, we would hope to start the second round of prep sometime in the late summer, fall, for the next round. So this is our adjusted plan that we're thinking about. So just wanted to take some time to see if there were any concerns about that. Well, if there are no concerns about that, one last question I might have for the committee, as we've talked about,
We did just get a question from Jenny Hall. Does the director's award process include the contracting period, or is that only the time required to send out announcements?
The directors, that does not include the contracting period. That would happen after. The director's award process would be sending out the announcements of who's been selected and how much of a grant they would potentially receive.
I will also just say, I think Michael said it, but I just want to make it clear that I think we're considering kind of figuring out how we can make sure that we time out the second review deadline so it kind of matches up with this one. So that so we kind of do this and then we kind of do it again as soon as we can afterwards to try to get the last, I'm not sure exactly how much money we'll have left over, but something like 11 or $12 million still. So we want to make sure we have that also on our minds in case anybody is feeling like, well, when are we going to do that second round? Great. All right. I don't see any hands up or comments.
So one last question, if we got 2 minutes here, would just be, and if people want to let us know later, we've had some great suggestions about time commitments for the committee, and if there's, I know we said we're actively working on compensation, but if there are any other support or materials that would be helpful for the committee that you know of or you think we could use, that would also be helpful feedback. You can provide that to us now or later.
Great.
All right.
All right, I'll move us on. One thing that I just thought of that we haven't really talked about is engagement. We've done, I've talked to some of you about this, but we've done what I've been calling sort of usual suspects outreach. But as we hire on that final staffer for this program, and we're also hiring on somebody that's through our heat pump program, that'll be like an outreach expert. So we think that we want to like start to get out into the community on that program and with this program along with it. So just know that we're planning on doing sort of a not the usual suspects outreach approach as like a next step for the program as we hire on the rest of our staff for this and other programs. If you know anybody who's really excited about incentive programs, send them our way, especially if they're really sunny people that like to meet new folks. So public comment. So at this point we have, it looks like about 7 members of the public with us. And if any of you would like to say anything for us or for the committee to hear, you can raise your hand and we will go ahead and take that public comment now. Right, I have counted to 20. It's all the patience I can muster for silence. So I think we don't have any public comment today. So thank you all for coming. And we'll just start talking about next steps. Of course, I see, oh, a long comment. Okay. This is, I'll just go ahead and say this out loud. Because I don't know if all of us internally are having trouble seeing our chat. So go ahead, Brandy, just go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, sure. That's a longer piece. I just wanted to notify the group, and you don't feel the need to read through all of it, but the White House did release a climate and economic justice screening tool that they're looking for comments on. So feedback, I think, was initially only accepted through the 25th, but it has been extended. So anyone that's interested in seeing what's been developed so far, providing feedback, the second part of the chat does have that link to that new tool.
Thanks, Brandy. I'll say we've been having some internal discussion of it because there were some things that were curious to us. So we might just ask you some questions if that's okay. We like to geek out on maps around here, so. Thanks everybody for checking out that tool. And then, oh, the future engagement options. I was gonna mention that here, I guess, what I just mentioned about making sure folks know that we're gonna be in touch with you for ideas about people to reach out to as we sort of try to reach every corner of the state to make sure folks know about this and other ODO incentive programs. I think we're pretty committed to talking to people about all of our programs versus just one at a time for efficiency's sake, right? So just know that's coming. And then just a space if there's any questions we haven't covered. Now is a good time to ask anything you're wondering about, anything you want to comment on, members of the committee. Great. I won't leave too much awkward silence for that. And then as far as next advisory committee meeting, I'm happy to take silence as consent on this, but if anybody has thoughts, I think we're thinking about trying to get it on the calendar once we kind of see how many applications we have and we kind of feel confident about how long our review process is going to take. We'd probably be in touch to schedule a doodle to kind of come like right after that process is wrapped up, so we can kind of share how it went, what we learned, what went well, what didn't go well, and hear what, from your perspective as somebody kind of watching the program with an interested eye, felt like went well and what didn't go well. Maybe have some members of the review committee join to just like have a little debrief with you all. So that's sort of our plan for our next meeting in the fall. And if anybody has any thoughts or concerns with that, let us know. Great. Okay, well, our next step is me sending out that revised charter. Thanks for the feedback. We'll incorporate that, send that back out, and as long as we don't hear any concerns or objections, we'll work on getting that sort of finalized and out to you all and posted online. And then we'll be in touch on scheduling, and then we'll also make sure you get an email with the interest form for the review committee if anyone's interested in that. And as we mentioned, we're working on compensation for the review committee, and we're also working on compensation for this advisory committee potentially. The statute did not give us authority to compensate you, so we're trying to figure out if we can. And then, so just know that we're still thinking about how to handle that. And also, any other questions, anything else, you know how to reach me. I just sent an email to you all. So anytime you have any questions or concerns or need anything, just let me know. And we're wrapping up an hour-long meeting 4 minutes early, which feels pretty successful to me. So enjoy a little break before your next thing. And I'll stay on for the next few minutes if anybody needs anything. Okay, I'm gonna go. Thanks.